So welcome everyone. We are now recording, as hopefully you can all see. Welcome to our call on the private Prefetch Proxy. I knew I wouldn't get that right. I've been struggling with that every time. So the call with Kenji. So thank you everyone for finding the time to join us, and thank you in particular Kenji for making the time for the call. As you all may have seen from your emails, we have some pre-submitted questions which we will work through first, and then time permitting, we'll then pick up on any questions that anyone else wants to chip in. So if there are any questions that you want to chime in with, then by all means put those in the chat or raise your hands using the Zoom tool, and when we get to that point in the proceedings, I'll take the questions in the order that they were raised. So without further ado, let me put on the screen the questions themselves so you can see them. I can just find those on here. Rather unfortunate, they've been hidden, so let me do that again. Right, so hopefully you can see the slides. I'll go to the next slide. My cursor goes in the right place, and then we should be good to go. So Kenji, thanks again for making the time. Should we just work through these? Is that the best route to do it? Yep.
So maybe I'll go with the first one. Although one thing I would like to do before going to the first one is maybe clarify a few things just to make sure that we have the same understanding.
Yeah.
So because we've seen some confusion based on past discussion, and so I want to make sure that there is an understanding of exactly what it is and this is not. So one thing that sometimes people get wrong is this is only for cross-origin prefetching. So anything that is like same origin, same site, that's out of scope. And the reason for that is if you consider prefetching resource that exists on the same origin, it's still owned by the same company. And so from a privacy point of view, there is nothing to be worried about because it's the same company driving the prefetch and also serving the resource. So this is why this is only for cross-origin, cross-site prefetch. The other thing that's important to know is, although we also talk about pre-rendering, this is only for the prefetching part, where we want to fetch the main resource, the HTML, and in some case, when it makes sense, sub-resource that we can discover from that main resource. So typically that would be the style sheet, the JavaScript that are being added to the main document. And so those would be prefetched to speed up the page load. One thing to note is those resources are only prefetched. They are not evaluated, they're not run. So if we get a JavaScript, we're not going to run it and trying to get more out of that. So this is only fetching a couple of key resources to speed up navigation. So that's one thing. And then maybe to close, when we talk about this feature, we distinguish two types of websites. There is websites that we call referrer. Those will be typically websites that have a lot of links to other websites. And those will be the one that might be interested in this proposal because they could use that to speed up the navigation from their website to other people's websites. So those are the referrer websites. And then what we also have on the other end, the referred website, which are the websites that are being prefetched by the referrer website. And those websites might benefit from this feature by being prefetched from the referrer website. So I'll try to make as much like detailed, like when I will answer the question, I will make sure that I'm trying to be precise about which website we are talking about. But if it's not clear, let me know, and I will make an effort to be a bit more precise about that. All right, so maybe we can go back to the first question, unless there are questions about this particular introduction.
Don't see any clarification questions or hands raised, Kenji, so I think that was good. So let me put the questions up.
Okay, so for the first question, I guess everyone can see it on the screen, so I'm not going to read it. So I think there are two parts there. For the first part of that question, the proposal essentially gives the referrer website an opportunity to opt into using the feature. So if you look at the shape of the API, it's essentially a way for a website to say, I think it would make sense to prefetch links XYZ. And when doing so, using a a private prefetch proxy, right? And so the story for compliance with GDPR and e-privacy and other regulation, as far as I can tell, I'm not a lawyer, but as far as I can tell, seems to be similar to other services and features that a website will want to use or implement. So it's not necessarily the browser has to pay attention to those aspects per se. It seems to me that this is more kind of like if a website wants to use cookies, it is their responsibility to comply with the various privacy regulation in the markets they operate in. And so if there is something about cookies, they should show a prompt to make sure that they have the user's consent. So that's the way I think about it. That being said, again, I'm not a lawyer, and so if that sounds incorrect, I would appreciate any feedback on that particular point.
Thank you.
All right, so maybe second part of that question. So at the moment, this is currently not possible, but it doesn't mean that this is not something we could be doing. It's just that it's the first time we heard about this particular scenario. And so maybe, I don't know if the person that asked that question is on the call, but if we could get some more details about the underlying concerns, maybe, or like the scenario in which that could be useful, that could perhaps inform the design that we currently have.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was driven by questions around data localization, but yeah, I can take that away, Kenji, and get some clarification for you.
All right, so maybe moving on to the second question.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, so this part is more about for the longer term vision where there's this idea that perhaps we can find a way to have more than the proxy that is run by the browser. So to be honest, like there is still a lot of like open questions on that aspect. Let's see. Yeah, and before we spend too much time like trying to come up with potential requirements, what we really want to see is there any appetite for such a thing? And ideally, if there are interested parties, it would be nice to be able to have discussion with those parties so that we can understand what sort of requirements would be interesting, what requirements we need to pay attention to. So it's more kind of us saying that potentially this could be a thing, but we don't know nearly enough to come up with the full picture. So it's more kind of like a call for interest in a sense.
So for clarity, Kenji, currently the sort of Google would be the proxy operator, subject to clarifying if there's interest in others joining the activity.
Yeah, the short-term option that we're currently looking at is having the browser run the proxy, because it's so much more easier to reason about, right? We know what kind of guarantees we can provide because it's the same company. But if we add third parties, then there is a bunch of open question about how, like, is there any mechanism or process through which we can have similar guarantees? How does that look like? What are those guarantees in the first place? So that's a bit more complex. I think it will take a bit more time to get something a bit more concrete there.
Yeah.
And again, the key question, and that's going to come up a couple of times, is although we know the potential impact this feature can have on product that we've experimented with, like search, we don't know if it's interesting enough for beyond that. Like, are there parties out there that would also want this to be available? And so we need to get a bit more clarity of like how much demand there is for this feature beyond the scope that we know about, so that we can justify kind of more involvement, more energy being spent on expanding the scope.
Yeah.
All right. Number 3, let's see. Yeah, so I guess that goes back to the second question. That seems to be more relevant to the world where there are multiple proxies available. And so how can we have guarantees that those proxies actually do the right thing, right? So I guess this is still very much an open question.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe number 4. Yeah, so maybe perhaps the wording was a bit strong. We should take a second look at that. I'm sorry if people felt a bit kind of like pointed the finger at that. That was not the intent. So maybe before I answer the actual question, what I would like to do is clarify a few things. So if you look at the question, there is this idea that the proxy can see the whole URL. That is actually not true. And even myself, like I was confused about that. Actually, what goes on is the proxy, the purpose of the proxy is to help establish a secure connection to the host of the website that you want to fetch resource from. And so the proxy only sees the host. It doesn't see the URL because that's the only thing it needs to know to establish the connection. So the second part of the question where like submitting the whole URL, that is actually not what is happening. All right, so that's the first part. Then if I take a step back and look at the overall question, ignoring the particular detail of it, one of the key issues is that the browser is not really in a position to understand or vouch for the terms of service of, let's say, the DNS service currently in use, right? We don't know exactly what the DNS service is or what it does, or even what is the relationship with the user. Is that something the user actively understand or not? We don't know. And so, yeah, maybe that's one point. And then if we look at the non-secure DNS path, if we were to use the regular DNS service for the prefetching path, then what it will do is it will allow observer third parties to see what is going on. And that's very different from the current model that we have, where the user, by the virtue of like navigating to the link, already expressed their interest in a particular website. Whereas for the prefetching case, we are assuming that the website thinks it's a good idea to prefetch this particular link. The user may or may not be interested, and I think it would be wrong for us to expose that information to the DNS service because we don't know exactly what are the terms of service of that service, but also exposing that information to potentially additional parties that could observe that information and build a profile about the user. So I think this is where we want to draw the line. Like, we don't want to create a new series of like concerns by like introducing additional information on the network that is not available today.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Let me progress the slides.
Okay. So number 5, let's see. So here I'm not quite sure exactly about the underlying context for that question. So I don't know if someone on the call is there to provide more context. If not, as far as I can tell, like the proposal doesn't really introduce any restrictions on how the prefetch content could be monetized. So I think the answer is there is as far as I can tell, there is no restriction from the proposal on monetization and so on. So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's the only thing I can say. It doesn't feel like there is something interesting or potentially not working as intended on that front.
To maybe throw in sorry, Kenji, to
Yeah.
maybe throw in a supplementary on that, just inferring a meaning from the question, which may or may not have been intended. If content is prefetched, but maybe not ultimately accessed by the user, from the point of view of how it's treated, would it still be counted as viewed for?
Oh, okay. I see. Maybe that could be an interesting question. So, so when we do the prefetching, we are only prefetching the main resource and sub-resource that we can discover. And typically, like if you look at ads, for instance, those only come into play if you were to render and execute the page, right? So we're not going to prefetch ad-related resource because those things only come into play after you navigate, when you start rendering the page. And maybe we can revisit that question when we are kind of like looking into pre-rendering, but that might be better for like a separate session, because we still have a few things to figure out. In terms of views, if like the analytic solution is looking into like hits on the server to come up with like a number of page views, if it's done naively, then it could be the case that the prefetch on the main resource could be counted as views. But typically today, most of the analytics package are actually done in JavaScript, which will not be run. And so I think it should be fairly like an edge case. And then the other thing is, even if it's something that people do today, they could look into the proposed prefetch header to understand that those like fetch on the main resource are not actual page views. It's just like a proactive action on the part of the browser to speed up the navigation. So there are ways to make sure that the data is correct.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, so number 6. Let's see. Yeah, so here, I think it's similar to a previous question where, given the fact that the websites themselves are going to have to opt into using this feature and actually drive which links they want the browser to prefetch, from the browser's point of view, the browser is not doing any fancy AI or kind of like machine learning labeling. And so I'm not familiar with the Ofcom like core principles and all the context around that. But it feels to me that the website themselves might be concerned about this particular aspect. And if there is something that needs to be done in response to that, it will be on the website's end, not so much the browser.
Yeah.
And I can't talk about what are the plans from like other parts of the company because I don't represent them. But from the browser's point of view, that's how we think about that.
Thank you.
Okay, so maybe number 7. Okay, so this one is interesting. So because we don't want the prefetch to be personalized, right? If they were personalized, even if we were to hide the IP address, if we were to send the cookies, for instance, the server could say, oh, I saw this user a couple of like weeks ago. It seems that they might be interested in this particular article that we have before they visit the page, right? So that would be bad for privacy reasons because the website owners would learn something that they are not supposed to learn yet, right? They should wait until the user navigates to their page to register that the user is interested in X. And so the plan here is to, so for the short term, if we see that there is a cookie attached to an origin, the plan is to not fetch those links. Because if we were to fetch those links without the cookies and then the user navigates to that website, it could be a bad user experience because they would expect to be maybe logged in or see something that is more relevant to their interest, but they would be served with a logged out, non-personalized experience. And so that could be surprising, right? Let's say if we were to prefetch a link to a tweet, you navigate to there and see that you are not logged in and you can't like the tweet and you have to go through hoops. That would be a bad user experience. And so for the short term, the plan is not to prefetch links that have cookies attached to it. In the long run, we have a proposal where on navigation, for the page that wants to opt in to that mode, they could tell us, I'm okay with being prefetched without cookies. I can deal with the upgrade on navigation. And so the idea would be that on navigation, they would get access to their cookies storage, and it will be up to them to update the page or fetch the right resource to make it more personalized or logged in. So that's kind of like for the longer term, but that's the rough story that we currently have. And we're still iterating on that. So if people have like feedback or additional like question, I can send a link later to the GitHub repo where the proposal is currently being discussed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, so maybe question number 8. Yeah, so on this one, I think again, it's a matter of us knowing that potentially this could be a concern and offering an easy way to address that issue. That being said, if there is demand for like something that is maybe a bit better in the sense that opting out is kind of like it's saying no to the performance benefit, maybe there is a better way to do it. And so it's just a matter of finding the right partners to talk to explore what additional options we could be looking into. So I don't know if anyone on the call has more details on this particular topic, but essentially we are like interested in looking into additional options. We just want to make sure that if we were to create something, it will actually solve an interesting use case and be useful for the folks that have like that particular set of use case. So again, I can send a link to the repo in case that's not already known, but we would welcome feedback and kind of more use case about why what we currently have doesn't really solve the issue, or maybe does it, but in non-efficient ways. So that's what I have to say on that.
Great. Thank you, Kenji. Let me move on.
Okay. Let's see.
This is a linked question on geolocation, clearly here.
I see, yes. So, yeah, again, I think for that one, it's similar to some of the other questions where I think, again, this is the responsibility is more on the website side, because they would be the one that decide which links to prefetch. And so I'm assuming that, let's see, I think I have it slightly in the wrong order, so let me double check. Yeah, okay, so that's my number 10, and that's your number 9. So yeah, I'm assuming that today they are already maybe not putting links to the websites that are maybe like considered illegal or are the subject of a court order. And so I think it would be very rare that they will mistakenly like prefetch those links because those links don't exist in the first place. But even if those links were actually available, I think it's still the responsibility of the website to make sure that they are complying with the different like rules and legal regulation that exists for the market that they operate in. So yeah, I think that's essentially the same kind of answer, which is we are only offering an API that websites have to decide to use. And so it's on their end that the responsibility occurs. Okay, so maybe number 10. Yeah, so I think it's similar also in the sense that I'm assuming that the scenario is maybe there's like an internal website that has linked to page that are kind of like hosted on internal only domains. And so obviously it would be wrong to use the prefetching feature to prefetch those links, because an external party, the proxy, would then learn about internal only domains, right? And so I think it's a matter of making sure that people understand the model that is beyond that feature, and that maybe IT admins have rules in place that say, like, we should not use this feature for links to internal only pages. And if it's interesting, perhaps we could look into having an enterprise policy so that IT admins could disable the feature completely and maybe have the peace of mind that no one is going to mistakenly use the feature and prefetch links that they should not.
That might be a sort of a sensible sort of safety feature, I would have thought, Kenji, to avoid any problems there.
Yeah, and I think that should be fair. Like, it's not different from other services that Chrome has, where there is enterprise policies for IT admins to say, I'm not comfortable with this particular service, and so I want to turn it off, and that's all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so number 11. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so I think here we are essentially aligned, because what happens on the server side in terms of like increase of network traffic, more power data center power consumption, there is also the equivalent on the user side, where, like, if we were to prefetch all the links, right? If the website would tell us, I don't know what makes sense, but I'm going to ask you to prefetch all the links on my page. Obviously, that's going to be bad for the users, but also the website owners, because there will be a lot of waste. And so, like, we're not going to blindly follow what the website wants us to do, right? There is a limit to how much, how much we want to balance between using data and spinning up navigation. We want to strike the right balance between providing value at the minimum amount of cost, right? So that's one part. And then the other thing could be, from the server, the website owner's point of view, the one that are being prefetched, the proposal also has ways for those websites to say, I'm experiencing a ton of traffic right now. Maybe it's like Black Friday. I want to spare my resource. I don't want to have like prefetching for now. So there is a way for the website to say, like, this is a prefetch request. Sorry, I'm not interested in that at the moment. So there are ways for website owners to mitigate the concern. And obviously, we want to hear back from website owners in case it's not working for them, right? We want to make sure that this feature is working both for users, but also website owners.
I suppose the following question is I guess the other side of that, in terms of the network operator with sort of
I see. Okay, because on that one I was not exactly sure what was the underlying concern. So I guess that, yes, perhaps like traffic spike for network operators can also be a concern. I see. So for that particular aspect, we currently don't have an option, but if it turns out that this is actually significant, that's also something we could explore.
Yeah. Yeah. Stretch. Right. I can see a few comments in the chat, so we come on to those, time permitting. But,
okay, so maybe we do the last few questions, and then we go back to the chat, I guess. Number 13, let's see.
So suppose
yeah, so for that one.
So as I say, it's a bit like the I guess the split horizon sort of corporate sort of enterprise opt-out. Might there be an equivalent for consumers in some cases?
Yes, that could be the case. And also we want to provide users with the option to opt out as well. So that could be another way to do it. If they are using DNS as part of the parental control solution, then the proposal already has a way for ISPs to say, we want to know before the navigation, like, so that we can have a say about actually this website is not supposed to be something that this user should see for various reasons, parental controls being one of them. So that's how we think about it at the moment. But if this is not enough, if there are like concrete scenarios that people have thought about where this would not work, again, feel free to share some feedback on the GitHub repo so that we can look into other options. Okay, so maybe number 14. Okay, so this one, I think we kind of regret putting that there because when we had an idea in mind, and actually when we took a second look at it, we realized that it didn't make quite much sense for the scope that we are looking at the moment. Maybe this could come into play when we have like third-party proxies, but as I said earlier, it's still very much a space with a lot of open questions that I think it was a bit premature for us to even put that out there. And so I'm really sorry to have maybe some people excited, some people maybe concerned, but I think for now, we are going to retract that. I didn't want to do it before the meeting because that could be a bit odd, but we are probably going to remove that part from the explainer because what we had in mind actually doesn't really make sense, at least for now.
Yeah.
And I guess for the part of like, what did we mean by gain traction? I think one of the concerns we had at the time was we were not sure about how the adoption would look like. And so we wanted to see like some appetite for this kind of like approach to be a thing. And as probably like a lot of folks know, even getting DNS over HTTPS going is not easy. And so like having this additional thing coming into play like felt a bit like this is a lot going on. So that's why we were like, maybe it could be a thing, but we don't know yet.
Yeah, and I think from the last IETF 110, I think Oblivious DOE doesn't look like that's going to go forward as a standard. Clearly, it may go experimentally, whereas Oblivious HTTP does look more likely to get getting traction. But yeah, you can revisit that in due course.
Yeah.
If needed.
Okay, so I guess the last question on the slide. Yeah, that's the question that maybe everyone probably has on their mind, including myself. So I think the way we think about it is that there are two facets to this space. There is the one that we talked about on our blog, where it's the combination of a browser-run proxy on surfaces that the browser either operate, right? Like for instance, the new tab page in Chrome, or surfaces that the owner of the browser operates. So in our case, it could be, for instance, search, Google search, right? For that particular set of like elements, this particular context is fairly well understood, both in terms of like impact, because we've done an experiment, we know that this is like significantly impactful. It does speed up tremendously the navigation to other websites. And then the other thing we understand quite well is the privacy properties of that model, because all the parties involved are essentially the same. And so the links that exist on those surfaces are already known, right? We know what are the links that are on these like surfaces, whether it's like the Chrome browser surface or the search page, we already know all of that. And so from the proxy's point of view and from a user mental point of view, there is no new information being exchanged. And so it's much easier to reason about. So that's one model. And I think for this one, we have all the elements in place. And so I think it could happen pretty soon. We want to make sure that we get everything right. And there are a few things that we still need to do. But I think this piece could move a bit faster than the other one. And so let me talk about the other one. The other one is about expanding beyond that scope. It's about making this feature available to other websites. And our hope is that this could help make the web like faster. And ideally, my hope is that because of that, we'll see users explore a more diverse set of websites because the friction of engaging with something new will be lower because they will know that on average, the page load time would be much shorter. And so we are hoping to see more engagement with a more diverse set of websites, which would be great for the web ecosystem. So here, the key thing is we have a proposal that covers the baseline aspect, like what is the shape of the API. And I think that works quite well. But we still have a few open questions. The biggest one being, how much demand is there for this particular context? Like how many websites out there would be interested in being able to take advantage of that feature if it was available? And the reason this is important is because beside the API shape, there is also a lot of questions about can we actually provide the service to other websites, like ideally for free, right? Like what is the demand looks like? Is that something we can support? So that's one part. And then the other part is the model that we have where the proxy is run by the browser and it comes up with like some properties, right? The proxy is only meant to speed up navigation. It's not meant to collect data. Is that kind of like model acceptable for the parties that might be interested in taking advantage of this feature to speed up the web? And so what we're looking for is essentially partners coming up and say, this is interesting, we'd like to use it. The model that you have is working for us, or maybe not. And if it's not working for those partners, then we'd like to have a discussion about trying to find a model that works for all the parties involved. And obviously, like our point of view should be the users needs to be able to understand this feature and what it does and what are the properties of it in terms of privacy. So sorry for the long answer, but I think this is how we think about it. Like there is a piece that is essentially easier to reason about that could move faster. And the benefit of doing that would be that we can learn more about the impact and further help other maybe websites see the value in it and maybe trigger additional discussion that we need to understand how we can make the other part happen. What does it look like? Is it actually something that people really want? So that's essentially the current setup that we have.
Okay, thanks, Kenji, and thanks for working through those. Now I can see a fair few comments on the chat, so let's take those first, and then if we have time, we pick up any other questions. So, and I'll endeavour to relate these to where they apply in the questions. So I can see Gianpaolo, I think, was referring to the question. Question
Court
9.
orders, yes.
Yeah, about court orders, which is about applying national filters. So this is on geolocation. If the obligation is on network operators not to allow access to certain sites, potentially prefetching it. Yeah, I think your answer, if I recall, Kenji, was that the website operator could apply national requirements. Of course, in this case, this might be a prohibition on something that the website operator wants to serve up.
Okay, I think maybe I think there is also the angle of the network operator, which was not part of the question, or maybe I missed it. But if we include the network operator into the equation, I think the solution here is to use the proposal has a way to say, for this user or for this particular network operator, we want to know before navigation where the user is going, because there are things we need to do. And it could be parental control filtering. It could be a court order that says this website should not be allowed to be accessed. And so I think that would be the solution for the operator, is there is a way for them to say, we want to know about all the navigations, even if they were prefetched. And it's the key thing to understand is when we prefetch a navigation, the reason we are not doing the DNS request on navigation is that we don't need to. In terms of like performance, doing a DNS request for the prefetch navigation is kind of like doubling the work. And so unless we know that this is actually useful to another party, the default mode of operation is to assume that this is good for the user and for performance. And so therefore, there is no DNS lookup that blocks the navigation in the default case.
So there is the option to enable the DNS request and for us to be aware.
Indeed. Yeah, and the way it works is whenever Chrome like starts or whenever the network change, there is a way, there is going to be a DNS lookup for a special domain, I forgot exactly the term, where the network operators could say, oh, that's the signal for me to say, I want to know everything that is going on. And so that would be your way to say, like, I really need to know, like, the navigations. Yeah.
Okay, so you are implementing also the canary URL mechanism, something similar.
Yeah.
Okay,
something like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Next question. There was, in fact, there was an exchange between Peter and Jim about, I think this applied to Split Horizons, an external site requesting resources from a trusted internal site. I think from the exchange, that question has been dealt with, but Peter, did you have a, was there anything you particularly say on that?
Yeah, Jim's right. My question was about Split Horizons and just an external site requesting a list of internal resources. And there is not really a huge difference between an external site doing that just normally, except I am curious about like the possibility of a DOS of some sort of, an external site specifying a huge list, because this is all happening in the background. Will there be any kind of limits there? And is yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, so I guess maybe there is something specific to the like Split Horizon or enterprise scenario, perhaps, but in the general case, we want to make sure that the service is not going to be abused. And so there are things in place where we'll observe the kind of requests that we get. And obviously, if there is like some weird patterns going on, the proxy would just refuse to avoid like DDoSing the servers that are on the other end. And the other thing we want to make like possible for the servers would be to know if a request is coming from the Prefetch Proxy. I think what we're looking into is a reverse DNS, so that you will know that this IP actually belongs to the Prefetch Proxy. And so if for some reason the things we have in place are not enough, there is still a way for the server to like reject all of that traffic. It's like, okay, this is the Prefetch Proxy thing going on. We don't need to actually respond to that if it's like overwhelming.
Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. I can see a great question, supplementary question that Mallory has raised. This is to question 11 about increased traffic. which is where you got metered access to the internet, where that could literally be costing the user for every prefetch.
Yes.
And can the user opt out? Can they switch off the feature?
Oh, definitely. We also have a data saving feature. So there is a way for us to know if this user really wants to save data. So there is already a feature that tells us for that particular user, it's probably like not a good idea to prefetch because that they value more kind of like data saving over performance. If for some reason this feature is not something that a user wants to use but still want to save data, we will provide a way for users to opt out of that feature individually.
Just to follow up on that, I think that may not always toggling a setting may not really solve that problem. If I think back to the way I would toggle between, fiber and mobile, it's sometimes not, I'm not thinking, oh, I need to, the power's out, I need to switch to mobile now. I need to go now into my browser setting and like click a button so that it's not prefetching a bunch of stuff. I mean, it's just not quite convenient enough to say, oh, but the user has control over that. I guess the more general point here is that it seems to be the only reason why this is being proposed is to improve performance. But at the same time, as others have noted, and as the question 11 gets at, you actually, it's actually really wasteful. I mean, part of the reason why we need better performance is because websites are increasingly large. But instead of sort of reducing that, it feels like we're actually making it worse from one perspective, which is just the amount of data that's now being exchanged. So I get it, it'll give the user the feeling that things are streamlined and light, but you're actually adding more data to the mix. And that's, I think, an odd way to solve the problem.
I think we do have some way to control the data usage. So for instance, we have data that shows that a good chunk of the time that is being spent on the page load is actually the time to first byte. So if we really want to be aggressive about limiting the amount of extra data that this feature uses while still getting good performance benefit, there is a way for us to do that. And so the thing we want to do is for the users who don't have this like data saving features enabled, we want to set a small budget of extra data that we could play within, and we could go between just doing maybe the DNS resolution or fetching the main resource, or go a bit beyond that, which would be fetching the main resource and a couple of sub-resources. And again, we're not fetching like high-res images or videos. That would be very expensive. So if we look at the data, I think the benefit that we can offer versus the amount of data that will be potentially wasted is actually fairly minimal. So I think we can make this work for a lot of users and provide ways for users to have it the way that works for them the best.
I think if users are paying per byte, they'd probably want you to just minimize as much as you can without then assuming that they actually want more, because it's costly. But anyway, others have questions. So
yeah.
Okay, I think that was a great call out though, Mallory, because I hadn't thought about sort of the metered usage. Right, let me just roll through. Will browser extensions have the ability to block prefetching?
So let's see. I think that's an area where I'm not quite sure of the latest details, but definitely on navigation, the way things work today will continue to work. So I'm not sure about the prefetching part itself. That's something maybe I should get back to you with like a proper answer. But on navigation, extension will continue to work.
Okay, thank you. Question from Chris Box on networks. Yeah, I think he just sort of added to that certainly for mobile network operators, the ability for network to opt out of prefetching at least temporarily, would be very beneficial when they do hit sort of peaks in traffic demand on the network. But I think you addressed that, Kenji, that's something that you are going to think about.
And to be clear, like today, websites can do prefetching if they want to. There are ways for them to prefetch sub-resource ahead of time. So the issue already exists if it's an issue.
Yeah, I suppose that, not wishing to put words in Chris's mouth, the difference will be if the browser with what 70% or so market share prefetches, that's going to be more significant than individual websites prefetching.
And I'm also
again,
assuming that this prefetching feature does in time increase network traffic by more than say 10%. And if that's the case, then having the ability to press a button that's in a congestion situation would result in the reduction by 10% or 20% or whatever it is, could be a good way to allow people to carry on doing what they want to do without having to battle through the congestion.
Although I would not recommend that anyone does that like willingly. It's possible to block like traffic to the proxy, right? that could be a one way to do it, I guess. But if it comes down to that, I think it would be better if you were to tell us there is like way too much traffic. Maybe that's something we could help improve without turning it off for everyone at once.
I prefer this to be a request, as in we prefer you to stop prefetching rather than an order. There must be a way to design this, I think.
I see. That's an area where I don't have enough knowledge about what sort of signals already exist. Is there like a framework for network operators to communicate to applications about what is going on? How can they be nicer to the network? I don't have much context on that, but that's an interesting area that we could explore.
Yeah, I think I'm mindful that certainly in Europe, there are instances where there have been sort of past clashes traffic-wise, where you've had, say, the latest Call of Duty download kicking in, coinciding with a night when there's Champions League football, which leads to two quite significant peaks clashing. Anything to sort of dampen down other network demand would be quite beneficial in those scenarios. But maybe that's a discussion to continue offline. Right, moving on from Chris's question, Paul, could we, since this is restricted to same origin, could we instead permit inline objects to specify their separate URL as a cache key and just stream the main object and all of its dependent objects as a single fetch?
Okay. So maybe to clarify, this proposal is only for cross origin. So I'm not sure if this still applies given this clarification. But this feels a bit similar to some of the discussion we are having about having a way to bundle resource together as like one file that could be streamed. So there is work happening here to perhaps address this particular scenario. But maybe this is kind of like orthogonal with the private prefetch proxy proposal. I can send some details if there is interest in that.
Okay. Right. Moving through these. Question from Mallory. How is the user shown which links on a page are prefetched and which aren't? So is there any sort of user signal?
So that's an interesting question. There is no thing that the browser would do to show this link has been prefetched, this one hasn't. It could be something we might want to look into in the future, but at the moment there is no such plan. It could be something that the website decides to do. They might want to mark the links that they ask the browser to prefetch. One downside could be that they might not know for sure that the browser actually did it, especially if they have no relationship whatsoever with that link. So, yeah.
It's complicated.
Yeah, I could see the value in terms of like telling the user, hey, if you were just wondering about what this website is about, it's being prefetched, and so it's going to be super fast. You might as well like check it out. So there could be a user value in that proposal. So I guess we'll see how the market react and whether or not this is something that that folks would be interested in. Obviously, there are a lot of open questions, like if this were observable by the website, then they would know whether or not we prefetched the website, which they could use to know whether or not the link has cookies versus not, right? So there are some privacy questions to look into.
Yeah, I'm conscious we're up on the hour. Are we okay to continue for maybe another 10 minutes, Kenji, or have you got another?
I do have time, so we can go over the remaining questions.
Okay, right. So if people could try and resist adding more to this, that'd be appreciated. But let's see if we can work through these. Okay, so I think Alistair has observed. I think it's a comment rather question that I think this probably relates to the question from Jen Paolo about, which is really sort of all about digital sovereignty as to the ability for national regulators to put requirements on what data can be served. I think that's an observation rather than a question. Question from Jim. Any policies on data logging, retention, monetizing by the proxy? I think you addressed the monetizing one.
Yeah, so we do want to make it clear that this proxy is only meant to speed up page loads. Like it's not meant to like collect data and whatnot. So we want to make that clear. And as part of the launching this feature, we'll make sure that the privacy policy, the white papers that we already have for describing all the features of Chrome are up to date. If there is any feedback on like what should be mentioned, like things that people would want to see, that's always good to know. But definitely like data logging, retention, whether or not the data is being used for monetization, I think all of that should be like clarified. Yeah.
Okay. Question from Vittorio. Does the possibility of Google prefetching its own web properties but not those of possibly competing third parties create antitrust issues? Was this considered? You may want to dodge that as you're not a lawyer, Kenji, but I'll let you answer for yourself.
I think it would be better if I don't comment on that because I'm definitely not a lawyer. But yeah.
Maybe one to take away and think about and comment later if you choose to.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you. Question from Peter, will proxies be configured by IP or use domains, i.e. will the proxies themselves be blockable by DNS filtering services?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure about the implementation details as of today. So I think on that one, we'll come back with a proper answer.
Certainly, I mean, picking up on your answer about network management type questions, I can see there would be some benefits if it was a discrete property that could be blocked. Because
I think the key question would be whether or not we consider to be that to be part of the design, like intentionally so, with some guarantees about that being a thing in the long run and whatnot. Or if there are reasons for which they like ignoring the network operator use case, if there are reasons why this could be a bad thing for users, whether or not this could go away. So I think it's one thing to say this is how it is today, but if there is an assumption that this is solving a use case, we want to make sure that we understand that's the case and that we agree that, yes, that's the right way to solve that use case. Maybe there's a better way to do it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Question from Pat. Can you share the GitHub URL and header? And if you share that with me, so Kenji, I'll happily put that in the notes.
Yeah, I think the link was posted. I can put a link to the section that is most relevant to network operator.
Oh, and I can see, Peter put put it in there afterwards. I hadn't scrolled down that far, so thank you, Peter, for doing that.
Okay, I guess Andreas has already left. Thanks.
Yeah. Is there a live prefetch proxy that we can experiment with?
Maybe if you look carefully enough in the code, maybe you might find it. But this is not going to be something that we want people to experiment with yet. But if there is interest, when it is ready, I will make sure to share more instruction about how that could work. Yeah.
Perfect. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, which Chrome release, I think, is the final question.
I wish I could answer that question. If you were to ask me a couple of weeks ago, I would have tell you a number, but this week the number would be different. We are still looking at like the final details and making sure that all the stakeholders are happy with the plan, and so on and so on. So I don't think I can tell you a Chrome release and not feeling sad a couple of days later.
Can you say that it will be no earlier than release X, to give some idea of possible timing? Is that possible?
What's the current release that we have today? That's definitely an easy way to tell you.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So I think you might have seen that we sent an intent to prototype for the speculation rules, which is the name of the API that we use for the websites to tell us which links they would like us to prefetch. That was sent in February, and it's a very simple API. So in terms of code, I think it's roughly complete. It's more about the additional like work that that goes with every launch, right? It's more about the process than the code itself.
Okay, I think we've exhausted, excuse me, the questions. So conscious of the time, I think that's tremendously helpful, Kenji. I'll write those up and send out the notes as well as a link to the recording. I've no doubt that will prompt some other questions, but we can maybe come back to that in due course. But that was tremendously helpful.
And again, anyone should feel free to comment on the GitHub, file issues, ask more questions. The whole purpose of us announcing this work back in November, I think, 2020, and having it happening in the open is to engage with the community, understand the things we are getting right, the things we are maybe not like being aware of, and also, like I said, how much demand there is. Maybe this is not the right audience for that part, but how much demand is there to make that available more broadly, and being able to work with such partners to understand whether or not the model we have currently works for them, whether or not we need to change a few things.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you for taking the time out of your early evening. So I guess we should let you get back to your family. So that's really appreciated, Kenji, and thanks everyone for joining. I'll send out the link to the recording shortly, and then the notes in a little while. So thanks everyone. Have a great day. What's left?
Thank you.
For you all.
You too. Bye.
You.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.